Okay, so the next slide is messaging. So once again, it is the same WebORB client class, and here you specify the URL of where WebORB is running. You also need to specify the destination, and think about the destination as really just as a pipe. Okay, the messages come in, and then somebody takes care of distribution of those messages to all the subscribers. And here it's a fairly traditional concept, producer-consumer. So producers can publish messages, consumers can subscribe to receive messages. Same thing is applicable with our API for the Android apps. You can create WebORB client, you specify the destination, the URL, and then you can subscribe, specify the responder object. And responder is a very simple interface. It just has two callbacks, one for successful message delivery, the other for errors, if any occurs. There are two optional parameters. There is a subtopic parameter and the selector. So this way you can apply some sort of message filtering. To publish a message, you just use client.publish and you pass in any object. So this could be any primitive values. It can be arrays, complex types, arrays of complex types, literally anything. So this message will go out to WebORB. It will be processed there. If that destination that you see here is linked to a JMS or a MSMQ or whatever, then WebORB will take care of republishing that message into the actual destination. Okay. So and I also have a demo application that will showcase this functionality today as well. All right. So messaging on the Air side, once again, it's built right into Air SDK. There is a producer-consumer API, and there is nothing different that you need to do on the Air side. You can just use those APIs to do the pub sub and messaging stuff on the Air side. Okay. All right. So that's all I had as far as the actual PowerPoint. So let me shut down this PowerPoint and just switch to the actual development environment. So for development environment, what I have is I'm using IntelliJ IDEA, and the options that you guys have, I think at this point, well, I'm sure there are many options, but the two dominant options are IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse. So I've looked into both, and I believe that IntelliJ IDEA is really above and beyond of what Eclipse does. But once again, that's just my very subjective opinion. So, so here I have prepared several projects, and if you're not familiar with the project setup, it is actually very, very straightforward. So I'll just give you. You can either create new project, or if you already have a project, you can add additional modules. So if you're creating, let's say, a module for this, you can just say create module from scratch, and you specify that it's going to be an Android module, and then it just creates the basic structure for your application. Okay. All right. Once the project is created, you also need to set up your Android SDK and the emulator. And I do have an emulator running right here. I will not spend a whole lot of time on the details on how to set this up unless you guys would like me to do this, but let me go through the demos, and then if you want we can talk about the details of the actual setup. Okay. Now, the very first example that I have, I call it Hello WebORB. So let me show you how that code is structured right here. So first of all, this is my activity, the only activity that I have in this project. This is the one that will be started by default. And in here, whenever we get the callback for the onCreate, we create our WebORB client. And notice this IP address. This is kind of a system-level thing with Android. This is the special IP address that Android emulator can use to target the host machine. And as far as the host machine, I do have an instance of WebORB running right here, so you can see this process running in there. It could have been WebORB for .NET, but since I'm running an old Mac environment, starting a virtual machine for .NET would be an overkill for this purpose. Okay, so once WebORB client is created, I do also have, there's going to be an invoke button, and in there, whenever this button is clicked, invoke remote method is going to be invoked. And actually, here's the invoke button, and we set up the on-click listener. And in here, we're just going to invoke remote method. So in this invoke remote method, a couple of things are happening. First of all, we create our responder. And as you can see, responder consists of two methods, response handler and error handler. Okay, and in the response handler, what we are doing is just creating a pop-up. Okay, so in this pop-up, we're just going to display the actual result that we got from the server. Okay, as far as the actual invocation, it takes place right here, WebORB client.invoke, and I'm going to be invoking this class. It's called WebORB.examples.basic service. Method is calculate, and these are just hard-coded arguments that I'm passing to this particular example. Okay. So to run this example, there's a configuration that I have in IDEA, and you can see here this is the setup for running this example. Module hello WebORB. This is the activity I'm going to launch, and I can specify which virtual device to run this example on. So when I click run, some things are going to be happening, and depending on how fast your machine is, and mine is not terribly fast. It is okay. This could take either a couple of minutes, or it could be less than that. But one thing for sure is that this thing is not ideal for kind of live demonstrations. So hopefully it will get going very quickly. And meanwhile, here it is. It already is running. So if I click invoke method, an invocation goes out to the server, and response is going to come back. So here it is, result 2. Okay, and as far as these arguments, what they are doing is really 1 plus 1, where plus is identified as number 1. Okay, so here it is. We just basically did an invocation using native Java API of the Java backend service. All right, I see there are a few questions. There's a question on the minimum Android version needed. The versions that we have tested it on, we started with 2.2 and went up. So I believe the minimum required version would be 2.2, but it's likely that it will work with an earlier one as well. So we will just gauge this by the response that we get from the users on the versions that they're trying. But I think starting with 2.2 would be reasonable. But if not, really please let us know if you're targeting a particular version that is prior to 2.2. Okay, there's if developers can use I assume Burrito, but by that you mean Flash Builder Burrito? Absolutely, and we'll get to this. I will show the integration with Adobe Air apps and WebORB. So that's definitely coming. All right. So this was the remoting invocation, and it's actually very straightforward as you saw. So I will not spend a whole lot of time on this. So let me switch to messaging, because I believe this is a lot more interesting. By the way, there's a question on how to download IntelliJ. It's IDEA, I-D-E-A. Just Google IntelliJ IDEA, or I believe if you go to jetbrains.com, you'll be able to download. There is a free version called Community Edition, version 10, which includes Android support. So I think you just cannot go wrong with that. It's really the best development environment that one could have. But once again, that's just my personal opinion. Okay, so let's talk about messaging. And for that, I created an application called WebORB PubSub. And by the way, if you guys are not familiar with Android development or just getting started, it's kind of interesting. It's not your traditional Java application. So there's a variety of different concepts and conventions that you have to follow. So for example, one of them is the actual layout of various screens in your application must be encoded in XML. So for instance, for this, my PubSub or chat application, here's the XML that I have. And if you're coming from Flex background, it will look very familiar. It looks almost like MXML. But so anytime you need to lay it out, you can use it. You can use XML, or you can do it programmatically. So there are different options available. So right here, I have this linear layout that stretches out vertically. Then I have a list view. This is where my messages will go. And then I have a horizontal layout that consists of just a text field. You see this edit text, and the button. And this button, so the users will be able to enter text into this text field. then press this button, and the message will be sent to my messaging destination. Okay, so that's the layout. And then anything that the user does with the application is coded up through the activities. And this is my activity. So I'll go through this code in just a second, but let me take a look at some questions. All right, there is a question on if this webinar will focus on RTMP. At this point, this RTMP support for native Java apps is being worked on. So I don't have any demos for that ready yet. However, if you are using Air to develop your Android apps, you can use RTMP today. But as far as the native Java support, that is coming. So that's something that we will be introducing very soon. Okay, there's a question on what libraries you need to include into ClassPath. Only one, WebORB.jar today, and in the near future we're going to create another build called WebORB client.jar, which is going to be much thinner and smaller. Will these examples be published for download? Will be published the same moment when the actual webinar goes live on our blog and on YouTube. So there's going to be a blog post that links to the webinar recording, and it will have the perhaps zip files of all the examples. Any resource for learning Android layout designing, someone is asking. The best resource that I have found was just developer.android.com. There is a very detailed user guide that talks about various components, creating custom components, and so on. So there is definitely plenty of information available online. Someone is asking if they can copy of this presentation. If you're talking about the PowerPoint, we'll probably just include it into that blog post as well, so you'll be able to download it online as well. If you're talking about just the overall webinar, it's going to be on our blog. Okay, so let me switch back to the code. And in here, this is my activity. Whenever the activity starts up, I check if I already have WebORB client set up. If not, then call this setup chat function. And here, a couple of interesting things are happening, which were kind of new to me because I'm a noob as well. But remember that we have this list where we're going to publish all our messages. Okay, so this is our list view. Now, in order to put messages which arrive into that list, we have to create this array adapter and bind it to the actual list view. So this sort of becomes the model, okay, which is quite traditional in the MVC sense. So anytime there is a new message, we will just be putting it into this adapter. So we get references to our text input component and our button. We set up the listeners and do all. Now, here's what's happening as far as WebORB. WebORB client, we create an instance of it, point to our instance of WebORB, and now we specify the actual destination. So this destination is the bucket that will be accepting all those messages. Okay. And then we call WebORB client.subscribe to create our own subscriber so we can start receiving messages. And we need to specify the responder. And in the responder, anytime there is a new message, this function is going to be called. And in order to put that message into our list view, you cannot just reference your UI component. And the reason for that is because the thread that will be used by the Android, let's say, virtual machine or operating system, is going to be different than the thread that owns the UI components. Okay, so with Android, it's important that you delegate to the actual thread that controls the UI. And for that, there is a concept of this handler that you can send messages with actual objects, and then the handler puts it on the UI. But the long story short, this is how you subscribe. And in the send button, whenever a click happens, this is how you send message. There is a function called send message, which is declared right here. And all you do is just WebORB client.publish.